of Pure Light Family Chiropractic in Bend on for the webinar to Children Learn. So I am on a little bit early. We're officially starting in a few moments. I just wanted to get rolling. Dr. David is watching to make sure that I'm actually live and working. I did a webinar a couple months ago and I spoke just like this for about 30 minutes on an amazing topic on making conscious choices in your pregnancy, and none of it was recorded. It was just like I was speaking to myself. So I'm just making him double check my technical setup here. And so before we dive in, he's not on yet looking because I don't really start yet. But so really this topic came up for me because it's the end of August, so people are thinking about school coming up, and school, you think about children go to school to learn, right? And, how do we best set them up for success? How do we really know what their needs are? How do we meet their needs? How do we advocate for our children? One of our big themes at our office at Pure Light this month for the whole month of August is advocating for your children. How do you be the best parent advocate you can be across all fronts? And the schooling environment is a big one. And this year or year and a half, whatever, ever since this COVID world came into being, we are living in uncertain times, and a lot of parents are recognizing an opportunity. Hold on, let me just see the chat because I think I'm missing his comment. Okay. So a lot of parents are seeing this as a really big opportunity to reevaluate and to see what their kids' needs are. And a lot of parents are realizing that their kiddos were underserved in the public school system. And I'm not talking badly about the public school system. I know amazing educators, amazing administrators. I know amazing teachers who want the very best for the kids. But as I'm going to kind of break down, the whole system around it does not take into account how children really learn and how to best meet their needs. So we're really going to chat about that. I'm still waiting for Dr. David to give me the thumbs up that we're clear. I'm just going to keep talking. And so really, we have a lot of uncertainties this year already, right? Like, what's the date? August 24th, I think? August 25th. And we already just learned that kids have to wear masks in the school systems. I think most of them, at least in Central Oregon, probably across Oregon, and then, across the country, it's a big issue. And this isn't going to be a webinar about masks, but I, as a mother, can tell you that I would not put a mask on my daughter and send her to school all day. Like, I'm not judging you if you do that, but knowing a lot about physiology and just how brains function and how brains grow and they work, like, it is not healthy. And I get the conversation around, the pros and the cons versus being, at least a safety barrier. It's a whole conversation. I've really read a lot of the science and digested it. If you want to know my opinions on that, feel free to send me a message. But so we have the masking issue. So a lot of parents are like, okay, last year was a crapshoot, really. Like, we'll do our best. And this year, like, we're all go, in July. And then here we are, and parents are reevaluating, like, am I willing to do this? Can I do this? And now we have the uncertainty around, the mandates coming and teachers, being willing to stay or to go, and just really, anyway, all of this is coming to light. And I think we can always find those silver linings. What are the silver linings amongst all of this craziness? And I think the biggest one around advocating for our kiddos and figuring out how to best meet their needs and learn more about how we can help them reach their full potential is really around the schooling system and what can we do differently. So really, it's a great opportunity. And if you're just logging on and listening, welcome. I'm just about to dive in on how children learn. And maybe it's something you've heard before, maybe it's something you've never heard. I would love for this to be a discussion. I'm not standing in front of this camera telling you I know everything about how children learn. I'm a mother. I am a healthcare provider. I have my undergraduate degree in adolescent and childhood psychology, and I feel like I have a pretty good grasp around how children learn and how they grow. But it's also an ever-evolving situation for each child. Every child's needs are unique, and in that regard, every child's the way they learn is unique. But there's some overarching themes that we can talk about. Okay, so again, advocating for your child, meeting their true needs. Because we're told as parents, a lot of times we are told a lot of things from our culture, from our society, like our children need to pass certain classes, our children need to pass certain exams to be successful in the future and get into a good college, and we got to start saving now. And it's this whole like treadmill of life. But what I really want you to do is step out of the box. And if you're not willing to step out of the box for this 30 minutes that we're going to chat, I totally respect you and honor that. If you're willing to just listen and see if it resonates with you, that's cool too. If none of it resonates, I totally respect and honor that as well. But I'm going to ask you to step out of the box and maybe think about things a little bit differently than, how we were brought up, like our generation as parents now. We were brought through this system, and maybe we can do things differently for our kids, because there's definitely some evidence that kiddos who were brought up in the 80s, 90s, 2000s are not necessarily pursuing their dreams or happy as adults, or really even stepping into adulthood like they used to. So how can we help our kiddos reach the age of maturation with extreme of intense intelligence? I don't know, that just came to me. Intense intelligence, where they are so intelligent, you're just in their presence and you're just, wow, like, I'm so proud of you. I feel like you are really pursuing your passions, your dreams, you're following things that are fascinating to you. How can we nurture that in our kiddos? And I've talked about this in other webinars, but one of the things I love about humans, but especially children, is that we all have a light within us, right? And that light, when we're born, is so bright. And as children grow through their purity and innocence, their light is so bright. And I think that's why people who love kids, because they see that light in their eyes. But what makes me so sad is when that light starts to get dimmer and dimmer, and they get more shut down and shut down. And we're going to talk about part of getting shut down. We have a lot of shut down, disconnected, closed off kiddos in our culture right now. There's a lot of reasons why. I'm going to go into that a little bit, but that's a whole nother webinar. Okay, so the biggest thing, so I mentioned every child's unique, so how every child learns is unique. Some kiddos have, diagnoses of ADHD, they have, auditory sensory processing issues. So of course that stands out. Those kiddos have special needs, more unique needs. But really across the board, across the spectrum, all kids have unique needs. But they have some really big commonalities. One of those commonalities, that this is like a paradigm shift for some people, is that they don't learn by doing. They learn by being. And what I mean by that, they're learning just being in the moment. They're not doing something to have something happen in the future. So they're not, they're just in the midst of learning through being, and they are doing things, but they're not doing it to reach a goal. So as adults, we think like, say you want to go back to school to get your master's or higher education. You're like, okay, well, I just got to do this. I got to sign up for these classes. I got to pay my tuition. I got to pass the class tests. And then I get this piece of paper and I've learned some stuff. But you're like, your end goal is something in the future. Kids are just being. They're just naturally and innately learning. And they really need to be nurtured through that. What is tricky is our curriculums and a lot of our school systems, public, private, whatever, homeschool even, like they have an objective towards the end of it all that gets imposed on the kiddos a lot of times. And so a lot of kids get stressed out because they're like having to pass tests when they're in like third grade, and it's just not natural, not normal in terms of how kids actually naturally learn. So they're not thinking like, I'm doing this so that I can have skills and knowledge in the future. That's not what kids are thinking. They're not thinking, I just need to learn my ABCs so that I can read. That's not what they're not thinking, I need to read this book so that I can do something else, or I need to learn this math problem so that I can learn the next thing. They're just in it. And I feel like that has been forgotten and lost a lot of times. So where am I? Don't mind me. I do have notes. I'm going to keep me on track. So yeah, they're interested in the now. They're not interested in the future. They want to do real things now. and they want to do things that they want to do. And I think a big lesson to instill in children is, sometimes you got to do things you don't want to do. That's part of life. And I'm not saying not to instill that value, but when they're focused on learning, when you're nurturing their learning, really focusing on what is drawn to them. And this is where a lot of, if you've heard of Waldorf or Montessori types of schools, the private educations really lean towards this. Their philosophy around education is much more based off of small classes, nature-based, lots of time just learning life skills and having fun doing them, as well as, really having an educator be aware and get to know that child as if it was their own child and say, hey, your child is really gifted in, say, music. So why don't we encourage them to do more music than anything else? They're still going to learn the other things, but why don't we, really nurture that gift versus just say, well, you get 30 minutes of music, you get 30 minutes of this, da, 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 da. Like, it can be more focused to lift them up. And also allowing movement is key. So obviously there's recesses, and a lot of elementary schools are much based around, more moving and activities, group activities, but really kids learn through movement and they learn through socialization. And this is something that's across the board, but it's also a little bit more specific to males and females. So little boys, their brain is wired neurologically to learn through movement. So they have the hormone testosterone that's growing and building in their body. And literally, functional neurological studies show that little boys' brains grow more healthy when they're allowed to move. And that's why, boys are more interested most of the time in that like rough physical movement sports, drawn to like playing with, like soccer or baseball, whatever it is, movement, and not that, it's gender specific, but that's just typically how boys develop. Females' brains, little girls' brains, develop more through the social vagus nerve is what it's called. So they're more social. So that's why little girls are more into make-believe and pretend and playing house and playing with their dolls. It's not gender roles. It's just literally how their brain is developing. And of course, little boys can do the other things and little girls can do the other things. I think little boys and little girls should do both things. But brain development wise, we need to recognize that they have different needs in terms of their movement. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of little boys are diagnosed with ADHD. They have trouble focusing. Well, part of that is because they're stuck in a chair and their body needs to move. So that's really big. And part of the reason a lot of little girls can be frustrating for some educators and teachers in classes because they're always wanting to chat or pass notes around to their friends, or I'm sure nowadays it's texting, who knows, but like they want to socialize. And I think that there's a time and place for sitting down and learning and like being disciplined. And, I just thinking about these kids like sitting down without enough movement, without enough socialization, with their masks on, not being allowed to get close to each other, it just sounds like not being nurtured in what they need to learn. It just doesn't sound healthy for their overall well-being or their ability to learn. So that's my opinion. Take it or leave it. Okay, so let me get back on track here. So some good examples. I just want to kind of like really nail this down here. So those whole meaningful activities. Kiddos want to be involved in whole meaningful activities. And they want to understand what they're doing, and they want to talk about it, and they want to do it themselves. They want to find their independence. They don't want to be told, hey, read pages, 5 through 12, and then write an essay on it, and then do this. Like, that's not what they want to do. They want to be there's other ways to teach kids things. And you may be thinking like, well, what does this woman know? She's not an educator. Like, I didn't go to school to be a teacher, but like I said, I do understand the psychology in these kiddos. They want to figure it out themselves. And that's truly how they learn. And some kids are more kinesthetic. They learn hands-on. Some kids are more auditory, etc. But overall, like either way, they want to step in and do it themselves. They don't want to be told what to do so that they can pass a test later on. That's just not how they learn. So I'm talking a lot about what they're not, and I am going to get into what they are. Really, some examples are really as early as, toddlerhood. So a lot of people see, a little toddler like 9 months to a year-ish, in that range of learning how to walk. We're like, oh, look, they're learning how to walk. And in their little mind, they are not learning how to walk. They are walking. They're walking. And then when you hear a baby babbling and just making noises, you're like, oh, they're trying to talk. That's really cute. And it's like, no, they are talking. In their state of consciousness, they are talking, and you may not know what they're saying. You may be like, oh, well, that's just babble. Like they're not making words, but in their mind, they're speaking to you. They just haven't figured out how to put the words together with their tongue, and they're coordinating their movements of their mouth, but they will. It's not that they're learning. They just are doing. So I feel like those are really good examples. Same thing with reading. Like when you're teaching a child how to read, they're not learning how to read. They're just doing it. Maybe it starts as early as like 2 years old. Like my daughter, I have a 2.5-year-old. She literally memorizes books. Of course, you know how kids want to read the same books over and over and over? They want to watch the same shows or movies over and over and over because they're being a part of it. They're not just listening or taking it in passively. My daughter literally, like if I, and we switch up books, there's like literally probably like 100 books that we rotate in our house. And then we just went to the library today. We have so many books and she wants to read them over and over and over again. And she's literally memorized them. There's so many times where I'm like, I have the book open and she's reading the book to me. She doesn't understand how to read sentences or words or even pronounce words. Like I'm not one of those parents who's like taught her, how to read yet, but she has memorized the book and in her mind, she is reading. She's not going to learn how to read. She's not in the process of learning how to read. She is reading. It just changes in definition over time. So as she does, comprehend more, then the reading just changes conceptually, but it's still reading. Even, picture books, looking at pictures and telling your own story in their mind is still reading. It's cultivating that imagination. I know in some like more Waldorf based education systems, they actually kind of discourage reading books because they're like, well, it takes away from that imagination, but I think you can put it into it. Same thing with like coloring, like we think, oh, we got to teach them how to color in the lines. Like, let's give them this coloring book and they color the cat or the dog. And really the best thing to do is just give them a blank piece of paper and some crayons or paint and let them just create. And in their mind, they're not learning how to paint. Again, they're not learning how to draw or color. They're just doing. And as their brain develops, nurturing in a proper way without interference, they learn to be really good at something, whether it's drawing, coloring, art, music, and so forth. So I could go on and on with examples on that. I'm assuming that you guys have heard enough examples. But really going back to walking, talking, reading, these are pretty much skills that any kiddo is going to pick up in our culture because they're everywhere. But then in terms of other things down the line, we need to be focused. We need to teach them things, right? But they still need to learn by being and experiencing it versus just, how much of our education growing up is like, oh, just memorize this stuff and then regurgitate it. And then you just dump it from your brain and you don't remember it. Not everybody probably feels that way, but I think the majority of people do because they're not really experiencing the learning. And I think whether it's math, arithmetic, algebra, reading, writing, essays, any of that stuff, science, it can be more hands-on and more of a being experience versus a doing experience. So we talked about being fascinated by things and really helping their worldview be shaped around what they're called to, right? Because I truly believe that we all have a calling in this world and children are discovering it. And maybe we have multiple callings each, I don't know, but kids are discovering it. But we try to take all these kids and put them in this box and say, you have to follow these rules, you have to pass these tests, you have to go to college. And honestly, college is becoming irrelevant in a lot of professions. To be a chiropractor, you have to have an undergraduate degree, a Bachelor of Science degree, and then you have to go to school, you have to pass a certain amount of tests and get into a chiropractic school and go through 4 years of a doctorate program. I get it. You have to get through certain professions, you have to jump through certain hoops and pass certain board exams and all that crazy stuff. But kids aren't there yet. And I don't think they should be standardized, personally. So because honestly, they're going to resist it. It's not uncommon for kids to hate going to school. They might like going to school to see their friends, but most of the time they hate it. Honestly, they don't like it. And a lot of kids are medicated. The fastest growing population in this country of psychoactive medications are in 5 years of age. Like, if you can't hear my frustration with that in my voice, like, I just want to tell you that is not okay. That is not okay for 5-year-olds to be on Ritalin. It is not okay for kids to be hooked on these medications through school. It changes the way their brain develops. It leads to all sorts of issues in their ability to adapt to life. It is not okay for 12-year-olds to be on birth control because they have acne or because whatever. Like, that is not okay. That's a whole other topic. Dr. Liz is doing a webinar on taking charge of your fertility and really educating. I think it's important to educate little girls on their cycle and their fertility and ovulation. Whole other topic. But it is not okay to be putting these drugs in our kids just to get them through school. Like, I really feel strongly about that. And if you know providers who are doing this, you can tell them that I do not approve of that. It is not okay. And as pediatric chiropractors, we help kids get off those medications. We help calm down their nervous system. We help refocus their brain. We help extinguish primitive reflexes that are stuck. We help release old traumas through our adjustments. It's powerful stuff, and they do not need to be medicated. Okay, so where am I? I'm just going to go on tangents after tangents. I'm looking at my computer. That's why I'm not looking at you. Okay, I said all that. A good example is like, I'm just going to give one more example, I promise. But so say you have a child who loves to bake, right? They love mixing all the flour together and cracking the eggs and watching it change in the oven and taking out and eating these delicious treats. Hopefully organic, non-GMO, coconut sugar, all the good stuff. But say they love to bake. And you go up to them and like, oh, do you want to be a baker when you grow up? They're like, I am a baker. Like, I am. Like, maybe I'll continue baking throughout my whole life. Maybe I'll make money doing it someday. I don't even know what that means. They just are baking. And I really can't emphasize it enough, because I'm like, what do I want this webinar to be focused on? And I really want to lay that point down. It's like, we need to shift the focus in helping these kids enjoy their childhood and learn the best they can. Okay, so they have to be in complete control of their own learning. And so if your child is in or will continue to be in the traditional public school setting, you still have a huge opportunity to help them with this intentional learning. I mean, you can talk to their teachers and see, you can be involved as a parent and be an advocate for your parent. And if you're getting, poor results from the teachers, or the teacher says that your kid's not listening or isn't getting certain things, or if your kid is coming home like not happy or doesn't want to go to school, maybe really look deeper, get involved, versus just be like, oh, we'll just suck it up and do it. Like, if you had a job that you hated, if you were like, I hate my job, I really don't want to be here, I don't like the people I work with, I don't believe in what they're teaching me, I'm not interested in this, I don't like the people I'm around, maybe they're getting bullied, maybe they're just, ignored or underheard, would you keep going to that job? Like, no, you wouldn't. So why do we expect our kids to keep doing it? And that's where this being an advocate comes. And I'm not saying, oh my God, pull your kid out of that school and do something different. Like, maybe that's the case in an extreme situation, but sometimes it's just getting involved. And I feel like as parents, we need to be less passive and more involved for our kiddos. And so if your kiddos are in that public-private schooling system, you still have that whole opportunity. I mean, that is only from 9 to 3. So you have the morning time, and then you have the whole afternoon and evening to really nurture that them learning by being, right? Whether it's like they love the extracurricular activities, whether it's, really doing play dates and groups and getting social time together with people that they really love to hang out with, or maybe it's just really quality family time, whatever it is, like really taking advantage of that time you have together. Homeschooling and unschooling, which I love, are becoming really, really popular these days, because parents are realizing that, like I said earlier, their kids were underserved. There's no way that one teacher or educator can really understand and meet the needs of 20 kids. If you can, like, hallelujah, like you are an angel on this earth and God bless you. But most of the time, some kids are going to get left behind. Some kids aren't going to excel. I mean, that's the thing. It's like you have this whole spectrum. You're like, oh, well, this kid's average. This kid is above average. This kid's below average. Like, what if we just met them where they're at? What if they were average or below average? What if we looked at them and said, how can we help them be above average at something that they really love? So that's really, I think, so important. I really, really do. But as homeschooling, unschooling, you can really meet your kids' needs because you know them better than anybody. And a lot of moms are like, hey, it is not for me. And maybe it's not for you, but you can still homeschool without being the teacher. There are homeschool pods, there are homeschool groups, there's homeschool curriculums where they're self-taught. And you may not even believe me on this. And if you want the research study behind it, just send me a message. But there's some research done. And feel free to type it in the comments if you want to take a guess. But how many hours, contact hours, so like literally like sitting in a chair academically, like being taught something, whether it's like reading, writing, math, basic, educational stuff, how many contact hours does it take for that child, your typical neurotypical child, to become a self-taught learner? And I'm talking like, so you're thinking about like their whole education. So preschool or kindergarten, like through 12th grade, say 12th grade. So that whole schooling. To be able to have a full education, it's 50 contact hours. Think about how many hours your kid spends in the school system, like thousands. Like I haven't done the math, but a lot. Like every day, like 9 to 3, Monday through Friday, for like most of the weeks out of the year, from their time they're 4 or 5 until they're 18. What if like that's where like homeschooling becomes so simple? And if you ask me, what am I doing for my child? I'm going to homeschool. Do I judge people who do it otherwise? No, I do not. It is not my place to judge anybody. I only want to encourage and empower. That's my goal here. But 50 contact hours, if done properly, right? So, and what I mean by that, it doesn't take 50 hours to teach them, the whole curriculum between kindergarten and 12th grade, but it takes 50 hours for them to learn sufficiently how to also be a self-taught learner. We have some new neighbors, and we were hanging out with them a couple weeks ago, and the woman, she was homeschooled her whole life. It sounds like her education was amazing. By the time she was in like 2nd, 3rd grade, if she didn't know the answer to something, her parents were like, oh, well, find out. Why don't you look it up? And she was completely capable at 7 years old, 8 years old, to go learn something herself. Especially nowadays with the internet, right? Back then it was like encyclopedia books, but now there's no shortage of information. There's YouTube videos, there's so much. And I think it should all be supervised and, under guidance, of course. But 50 contact hours for them to be a self-taught learner. And what is the life skill of being a self-taught learner is something that is going to bring them so many places in the world, versus so many kids are told what to do their whole entire life. And then they graduate and they're like, okay, well, I'm supposed to go to college. So they go to college and they do what they were supposed to do and what the culture tells them to do. So on top of, just taking their classes and paying their tuition, they're also doing things that maybe aren't so great, outside of class. And then all of a sudden they're graduated and they're like, yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do. I just want to get a job, I guess. And then a lot of kids graduate, or even in my generation, millennials are just kind of lost and they don't know what to do, or they're really unhappy with their job and they're not even using their degree that they paid $40,000 a year for. It's just maddening. So the whole system is upside down, in my opinion, and we can flip-flop it. I think we're in a really good place. We have a really good opportunity to do it. I think we're pretty much done. Yeah, I think I said everything I want to say. I just want to wrap it up and say, let's help our kids learn with support, with love, with guidance, with being an advocate, to help them reach their full potential, to help keep that inner light that they're born with as bright as possible, so that they can reach their full God-given potential and serve this world. Humanity needs more tuned in, in touch kiddos. And that's really our specialty. I know I didn't go into pediatric chiropractic at all. That wasn't really my intention, but in our office, we do specialize in kids and all kiddos from the spectrum of, severe autism through wellness. And we see so much of their light get brighter. And that's one of the reasons our office is called Pure Light Family Chiropractic, because we want to increase that light, that life, that love, that passion in all families, but especially in the kiddos. And so we are very neurologically based, brain-based care, very, very gentle. And we're here to help your kids thrive. We're actually doing through the end of August, so only like 7 days left. If you schedule your kiddo for an initial visit, it's 50% off to get started. It doesn't have to be scheduled like during the month of August, the visit. It can be scheduled in September, October. You just have to call and get it scheduled by the end of August for that deal. So our office is 541-382-1118. Clearly it's on the page that you're on too, and Shelby, our front desk gal, will get y'all scheduled up for your kiddos. We look forward to serving you. We look forward to helping you. For our tribe who's already been on here, thank you for tuning in. So appreciate you guys. And I know I shared a lot of thoughts, a lot of opinions, and love to hear feedback. I'd love to hear what resonated, what doesn't resonate, what's worked for you, what hasn't worked for you. I love being a part of this community. I love having these open discussions. So I just want to say, feel free to reach out to me anytime, email, at the office, Facebook, whatever it may be. All right, you guys, I hope everybody has an awesome evening and rest of your week. See you soon.